Welcome back, everyone, to Classic Books Deep Dive. This time we're going to crack open The Black Swan. The Impact of the Highly Improbable by Nassim Taleb.
Yes.
Have you ever felt like the world's just full of surprises, just things that you could not see coming?
Absolutely.
This book dives headfirst into that very feeling.
It really does. And what's so fascinating is how Taleb really argues that these unpredictable events, these high-impact events, the black swans, are not just like anomalies or hiccups in the system. They're really fundamental to how the world actually works.
Yeah, and he uses some pretty striking examples, too.
Oh, yeah.
The rise of Google. I mean, nobody saw that coming.
Yeah, right.
To the 9/11 attacks, just to really drive home how massive the consequences of these black swans can be.
And it's so interesting, too, how he suggests that even our attempts to make sense of these events after they've happened, to try to fit them into our existing understanding of the world, that might be missing the point entirely.
It's like we're trying to shove a square peg in a round hole.
Exactly.
Before we go any further, if you are at all intrigued, and I hope you are,
I hope so.
we have a link in the description where you can snag a copy of The Black Swan yourself.
You should.
Now let's unpack some of the core ideas that Taleb throws at us.
Oh, okay.
He spends a good chunk of the book contrasting what he calls mediocristan and extremistan.
Yeah.
Mediocristan is the world of the average, the predictable, human height.
Yeah.
Most people fall within a certain range.
Right.
So mediocristan is kind of like things staying within the lines.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. It's where the bell curve reigns supreme.
Okay.
But then you have extremistan, and this is where the outliers have a massive impact. Imagine something like book sales.
Sure.
One book can sell millions of copies, while others barely make a dent.
Yeah.
It's this world where rare events can completely reshape the entire landscape.
Okay, so this is where the black swans come in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're the ones that are causing these huge shifts in extremistan.
Exactly. They're the outliers, the unexpected, hits the events that fall outside of our normal expectations, and they have a much greater influence in areas like we were talking about book sales or finance or even historical events.
Now, one thing that really caught my eye was Taleb's critique of the Gaussian bell curve, that classic statistical model. He's not a fan, to say the least.
He's not afraid to make bold statements.
No, he's not.
It's interesting, though, because he doesn't completely dismiss it. He recognizes it can be useful in certain situations in mediocristan where things are, for the most part, predictable.
Right.
But he argues that it's a very dangerous tool to use when applied to extremistan, where those rare events can have such massive consequences.
Can even go so far as to call it a great intellectual fraud.
Yes, he does.
Strong words.
Strong words. But his point is that the bell curve can make us underestimate both how likely and how impactful those extreme events can really be. And this leaves us unprepared when those events actually hit.
So it's like we're using a ruler to measure the ocean.
I love that analogy. That's perfect. Yeah, it's just the wrong tool for the job.
Yeah. He also talks about the problem of silent evidence, which really highlights how our view of the past can be distorted.
It's a fascinating concept, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It's how we often focus on only what did happen, the successes, the survivors, but we completely ignore what didn't happen, the failures, the paths not taken. It's like we're only looking at one side of the coin.
So we're missing a huge part of the picture because we're fixated on the winners.
Yeah.
The events that made it into the history books.
Exactly. And this can lead us to make faulty assumptions about the likelihood of certain events or the effectiveness of certain strategies. It's like assuming that everyone who buys a lottery ticket wins because we only hear about the jackpot winners.
Yeah, he brings up Giacomo Casanova as an example of this.
Oh, yeah, Casanova.
Known for his incredible luck and survival against all odds.
Right.
He becomes this cautionary tale.
He does.
We see his success, but overlook all the adventurers like him who didn't make it.
Right, whose stories are lost to history.
Right, and whose stories we never hear.
We never hear.
So we're being fooled by survivorship bias.
Exactly. We tend to focus on the survivors, the winners, and ignore all those who didn't make it, which can give us a distorted view of reality.
So Taleb is saying we need to consider this silent evidence when we try to learn from the past and make decisions about the future.
Absolutely. We need to be aware of this bias and try to look beyond the obvious, the things that are right in front of us.
Taleb also throws this curveball at the whole notion of expertise.
This is where things get really interesting.
Yeah, he seems to believe that in many fields, experts are no better at predicting black swan events than anyone else.
Yeah, this is a pretty provocative claim, right?
Yeah, it is.
It highlights the limits of narrow expertise in a world where these unpredictable events can have such a huge impact.
Yeah, he argues that in complex fields like economics or politics, experts often get tunnel vision.
They get so focused on their area of specialization that they miss the bigger picture. They might have deep knowledge in one specific area, but that can actually hinder their ability to spot those outlier events, those black swans lurking outside their field of focus.
It's like that old saying, can't see the forest for the trees.
Exactly. And Taleb really drives this point home with a powerful analogy, the Thanksgiving turkey.
Oh, the poor turkey.
Right, the turkey is happily fed every day, assuming that life is good and predictable until, well, what happens the day before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that our past experiences don't always guarantee future outcomes.
So the poor turkey perfectly captures how we often make decisions based on past experiences.
Right.
Even in a world that's way more unpredictable than we like to think.
And what's fascinating is that Taleb isn't saying we should abandon trying to understand the world altogether.
Yeah.
He's pushing for a more cautious and skeptical approach to knowledge and prediction.
One that acknowledges that we don't have all the answers.
Yes.
And that surprises are always lurking around the corner.
Always be prepared for the unexpected.
He seems particularly critical of those who rely heavily on mathematical models, especially those built on that Gaussian bell curve to try to predict the future.
Yeah, he takes aim at those who put too much faith in these models, especially when it comes to complex systems.
And this has sparked some serious debate, particularly in the world of finance.
Oh, yeah.
Talleb argues that these models fail to grasp the true nature of risk, especially in extremistan,
Right.
where those rare extreme events can have such a disproportionate impact.
They just don't account for the possibility of those black swans.
Right, and he uses the example of long-term capital management.
WTCM.
A hedge fund full of Nobel Prize-winning economists
The best and the brightest.
who went belly up
They did.
because their models didn't account for the possibility of a black swan event.
It's a cautionary tale that highlights the danger of relying too heavily on models that just don't consider the full spectrum of possibilities, particularly those that lie outside our normal expectations.
Right, so this seems like Taleb's advocating for a more empirical,
More grounded.
a skeptical approach to knowledge, one that acknowledges the limits of our understanding and the ever-present possibility of the unexpected.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers and that surprises are an inherent part of life.
And one practical implication of this is that we should probably focus on minimizing the negative impact of black swan events rather than trying to predict them.
Yeah, instead of trying to predict the unpredictable, which is almost impossible, we should focus on building systems that can withstand those shocks, even the ones we could never have anticipated.
So he suggests a barbell approach to risk.
The barbell approach.
You protect yourself from catastrophic losses on one side,
Right.
while still leaving room to benefit from positive black swans on the other.
It's about finding that balance between protection and opportunity.
So being both resilient and opportunistic.
Exactly. It's a strategy that acknowledges the unpredictable nature of the world while still looking for ways to exploit the opportunities that randomness can present. It's like a surfer riding a wave. You can't control the wave, but you can learn to ride it.
Now, another idea that really resonated with me is this narrative fallacy.
The stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah, which is our tendency to make up stories to explain things.
Right.
Even if those stories aren't accurate.
Even if they're completely wrong.
Why are we so drawn to these narratives?
I think it's because our brains crave explanations, even if they're not true or logical. We try to fit events into a neat story, even if that story oversimplifies things or misses crucial details.
So Taleb argues that these narratives can warp our understanding of events.
They can.
And lead us to false conclusions.
Especially when we're dealing with those black swan events, we crave a simple explanation, but the very nature of black swans is that they defy easy explanation.
He uses the example of the 9/11 attacks, where there was this huge push to find a simple, clear-cut narrative.
Right. Everyone wanted a simple answer, a single cause. But as Taleb points out, black swan events often arise from a tangled web of factors. Trying to simplify them into a neat story can actually blind us to the true complexity of the situation.
So it's about accepting that sometimes there isn't a simple answer,
Sometimes.
a single cause that we can pinpoint.
Right. Sometimes things happen, and we may never fully understand why.
So we need to be comfortable with ambiguity and avoid oversimplifying these complex events.
Exactly. That's how we can truly learn from them and hopefully make better decisions in the future.
And it seems like what Taleb is emphasizing is that we should accept that we don't know everything,
That's a big one.
that our understanding has limits,
Right. We're not omniscient.
and that surprises are part of the game.
They are, and we need to be prepared for them. And that openness can actually be a strength, allowing us to adapt and navigate a world that's far more complex and unpredictable than we often realize.
Taleb also takes aim at our tendency to overestimate the role of skill and underestimate the role of luck in success, especially in areas like finance, entertainment, or starting a business.
It's humbling, isn't it,
Yeah.
to think that luck plays a much bigger role than we often like to admit.
So it's not about dismissing hard work or talent,
No, not at all.
but about acknowledging that chance plays a significant role.
Exactly. It's about having a healthy dose of realism about the factors that contribute to success and avoiding the trap of believing we have complete control over outcomes. Sometimes the dice just roll in our favor.
He also shakes things up when it comes to our traditional view of education.
Education.
Yeah, he argues that in a world shaped by black swans, we're often focusing on the wrong things.
Makes you wonder, what should we be learning in a world that's constantly throwing curveballs at us?
Right.
Taleb suggests that education should prioritize critical thinking adaptability and a tolerance for ambiguity over rote memorization or hyper-specialized knowledge.
So it's about being able to think on your feet, adapt to new situations, be comfortable with not having all the answers, rather than just memorizing facts and figures.
Precisely, in a world where unpredictable events can render specialized knowledge obsolete overnight, those skills become much more valuable. It's about preparing for the unknown rather than clinging to outdated assumptions.
And this ties back to his critique of those who rely heavily on models, particularly those based on that Gaussian bell curve.
Wait.
He seems to think they're missing the point entirely.
It's a critique that's ruffled a lot of feathers, especially in fields like finance and economics. He argues that these models often fail to capture the true nature of risk, especially in Extremistan, where those rare extreme events can have such a massive impact.
And he uses the 2008 financial crisis as a prime example,
The 2008 crisis.
which caught a lot of experts off guard, even though there were warning signs.
And his point is that their reliance on traditional models and their unwillingness to consider the possibility of a black swan event blinded them to the impending crisis. It's like driving a car while looking only in the rearview mirror.
So he's advocating for a more skeptical and empirical approach to knowledge, one that's constantly questioning assumptions and looking for evidence that might contradict our existing beliefs.
It's about being open to the possibility of being wrong, which can be a tough pill to swallow, especially for experts who've built careers on their knowledge and authority. But in a world of black swans, admitting we don't have all the answers can be our greatest strength.
Taleb also introduces this fascinating concept of anti-fragility systems that actually benefit from disorder and volatility.
Anti-fragility.
It flips the script on how we usually think about resilience.
Right, most systems are fragile, meaning they break down under stress. But anti-fragile systems actually get stronger when exposed to shocks and stressors, like a muscle that grows stronger after a workout.
He uses the human body as a prime example, which adapts and grows stronger when exposed to physical stress.
Exactly. By exposing ourselves to moderate levels of stress, we build up our resilience and ability to cope with future challenges, and Taleb argues we can apply this to other areas of life, business, finance, even politics.
So instead of trying to create perfectly stable and predictable systems,
Which are inherently fragile.
we should be building systems that can adapt and thrive in the face of disorder and uncertainty.
Precisely. It's about embracing experimentation, decentralization, and redundancy to create systems that are more robust to unpredictable events. It's about letting go of the illusion of control and embracing the dynamic, ever-changing nature of the world.
And this all ties back to his barbell strategy for managing risk, protecting yourself from catastrophic losses, while leaving room to benefit from positive black swans.
Right. It's a strategy that acknowledges the unpredictable nature of the world while also seeking to exploit the opportunities that randomness can present. It's about being prepared for the worst while remaining open to the best.
He also emphasizes the importance of skin in the game, having a personal stake in the outcomes of our decisions.
It's a powerful concept for promoting accountability and aligning incentives when we have something to lose. We tend to be much more careful and thoughtful in our decision-making. We're less likely to take reckless risks if we're the ones who will suffer the consequences.
He argues this principle should apply across the board, from policymakers and CEOs to investors and even academics.
It's about ensuring that those who make decisions bear the consequences, both positive and negative. This aligns incentives and encourages more responsible and ethical behavior.
So it's about creating a system where people are held accountable for their actions,
Exactly.
where they can't just pass the buck if things go wrong.
Right. It's about promoting a culture of accountability and prudence rather than recklessness and blind faith in models or predictions.
Taleb also cautions against confusing correlation with causation, a trap we often fall into. Just because two things happen together doesn't mean one caused the other.
It's a common error in thinking, especially when we're looking for simple explanations. In a complex world, we see patterns where none exist, particularly when dealing with intricate systems where multiple factors are at play.
He uses a humorous example to illustrate this: a rooster crowing every morning before the sun rises. Just because the rooster crows before dawn doesn't mean the rooster caused the sun to rise.
It might seem silly, but it highlights a crucial point. We need to be cautious about jumping to causal conclusions based solely on correlational data.
He stresses that this is especially important when dealing with black swan events, which often result from complex interactions that are difficult to untangle.
Trying to pinpoint a single cause for a black swan event can lead to a distorted understanding of the situation and prevent us from learning the right lessons. It's like blaming a single snowflake for causing an avalanche.
So it's about recognizing that sometimes there is no simple explanation,
Sometimes.
no single cause that we can point to. Sometimes things just happen and we need to accept that.
Exactly. We need to be comfortable with ambiguity and avoid the temptation to oversimplify complex events. That's how we can truly learn from them and make better decisions in the future.
And this circles back to the idea of epistemic humility. Doesn't it recognizing that our knowledge is limited and that we don't have all the answers?
Absolutely. Recognizing that our knowledge is limited and that we can never have a complete understanding of the world is essential for navigating a world shaped by black swans. It's about embracing the unknown and being open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
And this humility can help us to avoid the dogmatism and arrogance that can lead to disastrous decisions, especially when dealing with the unexpected.
It's about cultivating a mindset of curiosity, skepticism, and a willingness to learn from our mistakes.
Taleb also revisits the idea that we can turn black swans into gray swans simply by recognizing their possibility.
It's a powerful shift in perspective by acknowledging that black swans are not just theoretical possibilities, but actual occurrences that can have a profound impact on our lives. We can start to prepare for them. It's about reducing our vulnerability to surprise.
And so instead of burying our heads in the sand and pretending that unpredictable events won't happen, we need to actively acknowledge their existence and prepare for their potential impact.
Precisely. We need to expand our tunnel of possibilities to include those events that may seem unlikely, but could have a significant impact if they were to occur. We can't predict exactly when or how a black swan event will occur, but we can take steps to make ourselves more resilient to its impact.
And this could involve things like diversifying our investments, building in redundancy to our systems, or simply being mentally prepared for the possibility of unexpected events.
It's about acknowledging that uncertainty is an inherent part of life and that we should be prepared to adapt to the unexpected.
He also reminds us about the dangers of the narrative fallacy, our tendency to create stories, to explain events, even when those stories might not be accurate.
Right? Our brains are wired for storytelling. We find comfort in narratives that provide a sense of order and meaning, even when dealing with events that may be inherently random or chaotic, but this can lead to a distorted understanding of the world.
And Taleb argues that these narratives can blind us to the true complexity of events and lead us to make poor decisions, especially when dealing with black swans.
He uses the example of the 9/11 attacks again after the attacks. There was a rush to find a simple and compelling narrative to explain why they happened.
But the reality is that such events are often the result of a complex interplay of factors that are difficult, if not impossible, to fully comprehend. Trying to force them into a neat and tidy narrative can actually hinder our ability to learn from them and prevent similar events in the future.
It's about accepting that sometimes things happen for reasons that we may never fully understand.
And that can be a difficult thing to accept, especially when we're dealing with events that have a profound impact on our lives. We naturally want to find an explanation to make sense of what happened.
But Taleb argues that sometimes the best course of action is to simply accept that we don't have all the answers and focus on building systems and strategies that are robust to the unexpected.
He also points out that we often confuse the absence of evidence with evidence of absence. Just because we haven't seen something happen doesn't mean that it can't happen.
This is a crucial distinction to make. We can't rely solely on past experience to predict the future, especially in a world where black swans are always lurking.
He uses the classic example of the black swan itself. For centuries, Europeans believed that all swans were white because they had never seen a black swan.
And imagine their surprise when, in the 17th century, explorers discovered black swans in Australia. This shattered their long-held belief and highlighted the danger of assuming that what we've seen in the past represents the full spectrum of possibilities.
So it's about recognizing that our knowledge is always incomplete and that we should be open to the possibility of being surprised.
Exactly, and this is especially important when we're dealing with black swans. These are by definition events that lie outside our realm of previous experience, making them inherently difficult to predict.
So we need to cultivate a mindset of skepticism, being willing to challenge our own assumptions and beliefs, even when those beliefs seem to be supported by past experience.
Precisely, it's about recognizing that the world is far more complex and unpredictable than we often like to think, and that we should be prepared for the unexpected.
This leads us back to the concept of anti-fragility systems that benefit from disorder and volatility. Could you elaborate a bit more on that?
Of course, anti-fragility goes beyond mere resilience. While resilient systems withstand shocks and remain unchanged, anti-fragile systems actually improve and grow stronger when exposed to stressors. It's like the mythical Hydra cut off one head and two more grow back. It's about embracing challenges and setbacks as opportunities for growth and learning, rather than trying to avoid them altogether.
So instead of trying to create perfectly stable and predictable systems,
Which are inherently fragile and vulnerable to black swans.
we should focus on building systems that can adapt and thrive in the face of disorder and uncertainty.
Exactly. It's about embracing experimentation, decentralization, and redundancy to create systems that are more robust to unpredictable events. It's about moving away from the illusion of control and embracing the dynamic and ever-changing nature of the world.
This is particularly relevant in today's world where we are facing so much uncertainty and disruption.
Absolutely. Taleb's ideas provide a valuable framework for navigating a world that is increasingly complex and unpredictable. They challenge us to question our assumptions, embrace uncertainty, and build systems and strategies that are robust to black swans.
He reminds us that we don't have all the answers and that we should be prepared to adapt to the unexpected.
And that by embracing a more humble and experimental approach to life, we can not only survive, but thrive in the face of uncertainty and change.
One of the key distinctions that Taleb makes is between what he calls mediocristan and extremistan. Remember those terms.
Absolutely. Mediocristan is the realm of the average, where things tend to cluster around the middle, where outcomes are generally predictable. Think human height or the results of a coin toss.
Mediocristan is a world of relative stability where surprises are few and far between.
Exactly. But then there's extremistan, where rare events can have an outsized impact, shaping the entire landscape. Think of things like book sales, wealth distribution, or even the scale of wars.
He uses a simple example to illustrate this difference. A bakery versus a recording artist. A bakery operates in mediocristan. They have to bake every single loaf to satisfy each additional customer. Their daily sales are relatively predictable.
But a recording artist operates in extremistan. They record a song once and it can be reproduced and distributed infinitely without additional effort.
Their potential for success is huge, but so is their potential for failure.
Precisely in extremistan, the rewards can be enormous, but the risks are also much higher. It's a world of boom and bust where a single event can catapult someone to stardom or send them crashing down.
This distinction between mediocristan and extremistan is crucial for understanding how we approach risk and uncertainty. It highlights that we can't apply the same tools and models that work in mediocristan to analyze and predict events in extremistan.
We need a different mindset. One that acknowledges the possibility of rare and extreme events that can have a disproportionate impact.
Taleb's critique of the Gaussian bell curve, that classic statistical model, is a great example of this. He argues that it's inadequate for understanding a world shaped by black swans.
The bell curve, while useful in mediocristan, leads us to underestimate the likelihood and impact of those extreme events that are characteristic of extremistan, making us more vulnerable to their effects.
It's like trying to navigate a hurricane using a weather map designed for a sunny day.
Exactly. The tools that work in one environment may be completely useless in another.
And this brings us back to the problem of silent evidence.
It's a reminder that our understanding of the past is often skewed. We focus on the events that happened, the successes, the survivors, but we tend to overlook all the alternative possibilities that didn't materialize. It's like trying to understand the game of chess by only studying the winning moves.
So we're missing a big chunk of the picture because we're only seeing the events that made it into the history books of the strategies that worked, the people who succeeded.
Exactly. And that can lead us to draw false conclusions about the likelihood of certain events or the effectiveness of certain strategies. We might assume that a particular approach is foolproof because we only see the instances where it worked while overlooking all the times it failed.
That's assuming everyone who goes to Las Vegas wins big because we only hear about the people who hit the jackpot.
That's a great analogy. We need to remember that for every success story, there are countless others who tried and failed, whose stories remain untold. This silent evidence is a crucial piece of the puzzle when we're trying to make sense of the past and make decisions for the future.
So after diving deep into the black swan, what does all of this mean for us? How can we actually apply Taleb's ideas to our own lives?
One of the most important takeaways is the need to cultivate a more robust and resilient mindset. We need to accept that the world is inherently unpredictable and that unexpected events are not just possibilities but inevitabilities. It's not about living in fear, but about acknowledging that we don't have complete control over everything.
So instead of trying to eliminate risk entirely, which is impossible, we should focus on learning to manage it, to be prepared for the unexpected.
Exactly. Taleb suggests a barbell approach to risk protecting ourselves from catastrophic losses, while also leaving ourselves open to the possibility of benefiting from positive black swans.
So finding that sweet spot between security and opportunity.
Precisely, we need to be both prudent and opportunistic, hedging our bets and being prepared for a range of potential outcomes, both positive and negative.
Another crucial takeaway is to be skeptical of predictions, especially those claiming to foresee black swan events.
As we've discussed, true black swans are by their very nature unpredictable. Those who claim to be able to predict them are either fooling themselves or trying to fool others.
Yeah. So we should always take predictions with a grain of salt, particularly when they come from people who have a vested interest in a particular outcome.
Absolutely. We need to develop our own critical thinking skills and learn to evaluate information carefully, blindly. Following predictions, especially in areas prone to black swan events, can lead us down a dangerous path.
One of the most impactful takeaways from the black swan, in my opinion, is the importance of intellectual humility.
Right.
It's about recognizing the limits of our knowledge and being open to the possibility of being wrong.
This is a powerful concept in a world shaped by black swans. The ability to adapt, learn from our mistakes, and revise our beliefs is essential for both success and survival.
So it's about embracing a mindset of lifelong learning, being open to new information, and having the courage to adjust our course when necessary.
Exactly. It's about approaching the world with curiosity and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions.
The Black Swan is a challenging book, but it's ultimately an optimistic one. It reminds us that while we can't control everything that happens to us, we can control how we respond. We can choose to be resilient, to adapt, to learn, and to grow from our experiences, even the unexpected ones.
It's a call to embrace the uncertainty of life and to see it not as a threat, but as an opportunity for adventure, discovery, and growth.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Black Swan, we want to leave you with this question. What are the potential black swans lurking in your own life? What steps can you take to prepare for them, to mitigate their negative consequences, and maybe even position yourself to benefit from their unexpected arrival?
We encourage you to share your thoughts and insights in the comments below. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep an eye out for those black swans.